Did you know there's a scientifically validated technique that immediately ends a panic attack, no matter how intense or horrible it is? Did you know that there are simple tools we can use to help you automatically prevent any future panic attacks, so they never even happen in the first place? And did you also know that anxiety and panic are based on different brain circuits? And because of this, we need slightly different tools to free you from both. Thanks to over 3 decades of scientific research, we already have the answers you need that can set you free. Panic attacks are one of the most treatable issues, and there are no lost causes. You can be panic-free for good and faster than you probably ever imagined if you have the right scientifically validated tools. And that's what this episode is all about. So let's get into it. 2 years ago in Australia, 2 doctors and a physical therapist told me I'd never walk again. I had been in a wheelchair for over a year. I was getting weaker and weaker every day, and most people had given up on me. I was told that I should get used to living with my so-called disability, and that I should stop focusing on trying to get better or being able to walk again. This castle behind me is Himeji Castle here in Japan. It's been around since the 14th century when the mighty samurai roamed this area. And for several reasons, it's one of the most special places in the world for me. Even though I could barely get out of bed, I couldn't sit in my wheelchair without a lot of pain, and I couldn't leave the house on my own, I dreamed of one day being healthy enough to come back here again. Today, I live just a few minutes walk from here. My apartment looks out on this amazing castle. And I live with my now wife, who started dating me when only she and a handful of other people believed me when I said, I'm gonna walk again. So what does all of this have to do with you? What does all of this have to do with ending your panic attacks and the anxiety that surrounds them, so that you can have a normal, panic-free life? As you're about to find out, the answer to that is everything. So let's head inside. We have a lot to talk about and no time to waste. Hi, I'm Michael Norman, and welcome to episode 4 of Panic Free TV. For most of my career, I've worked paid only on results. What this means is that if someone comes to see me with frequent panic attacks, I only get paid if they never have a problem with panic again. It's made me focus on what really matters, helping people get fast, tangible results that really last. Because if I just followed the crowd and charged per hour like everyone else, I never would have discovered some of the amazing strategies I've discovered that have allowed my clients to finally enjoy a normal panic-free life again. For example, even here in Japan, where I can't yet speak fluently, my wife recently took 10 minutes to translate one of the techniques I teach to a yoga student of hers who hadn't been able to travel on trains because of panic attacks. When I next saw that student, she came up to me with a huge smile on her face, telling me how much fun she'd had traveling by train to another city to shop with friends, which is something she hadn't been able to do for several years. Now, of course, not everyone gets such instant results like this just from one isolated technique. But the reason I share this story with you is because I want to be absolutely clear. If you've gone through years of struggle, if you've tried everything you can think of and nothing's worked, or if you're still searching for the solutions you need, the only problem lies with the fact that you haven't been given the right help yet. Panic attacks never need to be a life sentence, and there are no lost causes. Of course, it can definitely feel like a life sentence or a lost cause at times, but that's why this is so important. I know you've been through a lot, much more than other people could ever know, and you haven't given up. That's a big deal, and I have deep respect for you because of that. Now, since we've covered so much already in the series, before we move on to the final and most important piece of the puzzle, I think it's really important that we quickly review where we're up to so that we're all on the same page. And the first fact that's really important for you to know is that you are not alone. Because unfortunately, so many people do feel alone, and as a result, there can be a sense of shame and isolation that goes along with panic. And there's absolutely no need for that. Because here are the facts. If everyone just in the US who had significant problems with panic attacks sometime in their lifetime were put into one big city, it would be bigger than New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago combined, the 3 biggest US cities. And if we look at the global picture, hundreds of millions of people have all been through similar kinds of experiences as you have, including me. Several years ago, I started having trouble walking, and because my amazing mother is paralyzed from the neck down from multiple sclerosis, I knew there was a good chance that I had MS too. I was on my way to the hospital to get the results, and that's when I had a panic attack. Now, I'm so used to being the guy that everybody turns to for help, but instead of helping someone else, suddenly I was my client. I was totally caught off guard, just as you probably were the first time you had a panic attack. And here's my point. Even though I've read every major scientific paper relating to panic attacks that's ever been published, it was still a scary experience for me. And even though I've worked with thousands of people through my programs and my private practice, it still actually felt as if I was suffocating, even though intellectually I knew that was impossible. I could feel my whole world change. Nothing felt safe anymore, and it was horrible. I was incredibly lucky though, because after I realized what was going on, I knew how to instantly stop it. I also knew how to prevent it from leading to any future panic attacks. But if I hadn't known what to do, the whole experience would have been traumatic, and most likely I would have made the situation a lot worse without even realizing it. That's because panic is deeply counterintuitive. Unfortunately, it's the common sense, logical, intuitive solutions that tend to make the problem worse. For example, Harvard professor Daniel Wegner showed that trying to fight against anxious thoughts makes those thoughts stronger, more tenacious, and more resilient. And James Gross from Stanford University has demonstrated that trying to fight against or control unwanted body sensations makes those sensations stronger too. In other words, even though trying to fight against a panic attack is one of the most natural things in the world, even though any intelligent person would do it, unfortunately, it backfires and makes things worse. This is just one of many research findings that clearly show that what seems like it should work with panic doesn't, and what does work is so counterintuitive that most people would never guess it in 1,000 years. On top of this, in all my years teaching doctors and medical students, I've witnessed firsthand that even in professional circles, panic attacks and anxiety issues are often deeply misunderstood, and the research backs me up. So if you've struggled to find the solution either alone or with professional help, please know that it's definitely not your fault. Because the good news, as the research clearly shows, is that when you use the right strategies, panic suddenly becomes one of the easiest and fastest issues to solve. That's because, thankfully, the research is clear. Panic is not an illness. It's also not a result of any mythical chemical imbalance, and there's definitely no panic gene that guarantees a life of terror. Surprisingly, the best scientific understanding we have about panic attacks is that a panic attack is just an innocent, overprotective, terrifying mistake, and we can correct it. Because as Professor Randolph Nesse from Arizona State University has pointed out, just like a smoke detector can have a false alarm in response to burnt toast, so too can our life-saving fear systems. And what's the burnt toast that can trigger a panic false alarm? It's harmless body sensations and thoughts that anxiety can create all by itself, even though there is no danger. A panic attack happens when anxiety creates body sensations and anxious thoughts, and because our brain has mistakenly learned to fear those body sensations or thoughts, it creates even more anxiety. This increased anxiety then creates even more body sensations and anxious thoughts, and around the cycle we go. I call this the panic pattern because it's the pattern behind every scary false alarm you've had. It's a scary but harmless vicious cycle, and it is the recipe for panic. To give you just one common example of how this works, since anxiety makes everyone's heart beat a little faster, if something happens in our lives that makes us fearful or anxious enough, naturally our heart will speed up. This is a completely natural and healthy response that we all have. But if someone is scared of a faster heart rate, then anytime they get anxious enough for whatever reason, it can trigger the panic pattern. Anxiety would make their heart rate faster, and a faster heart rate would make them more anxious, which would further increase their heart rate, and a harmless but scary vicious cycle would ensue. This is the core hidden pattern behind every panic false alarm, and it can work no matter what anxiety-related body sensations people fear, whether that be a faster heart rate, difficulty breathing, dizziness, shaking muscles, fear of unreality, or anything else. The panic pattern also explains why panic can so quickly spiral out of control. It explains out of the blue panic attacks, and it explains why panic can be triggered by certain external places or situations, because anything that can trigger enough anxiety to create a feared body sensation or thought, even if we're not aware of that trigger, can trigger the whole vicious cycle and therefore a false alarm. Most importantly though, the panic pattern doesn't just explain a lot about how panic works, it also gives us the path back to freedom. Because if our brain isn't triggered by the harmless effects of anxiety, if it doesn't mistake anxiety-related body sensations as being dangerous, then there can't be a vicious cycle and you can't have a panic attack. This is the secret to helping anyone end the nightmare of panic attacks and regain a normal panic-free life. And if I was bold enough to say that I'm most unique in any single way with my one-on-one client work, it's probably my ability to help people quickly change their automatic responses so they're not triggered anymore. And with panic, this is the key to a normal life. It's how I've been able to work paid only on results, and it's how I've been able so often to help people become panic-free in just a single session. Now, of course, ending the panic pattern is easier said than done, unless you have the right systematic approach. And fortunately, thanks to a lot of research, we already know what works best and what doesn't. Because in just the last year alone, 419 research papers have been published in peer-reviewed scientific journals directly focusing on panic attacks. Unfortunately, the average doctor or therapist doesn't have the time or training to read any of them, let alone stay on the cutting edge. And that's why so few people are getting the help they need. People are still being given the same old strategies we know are flawed. They're told to do deep breathing exercises, or to logically question their anxious thoughts, or they're advised to just keep busy in the hope that their distractions will keep their anxiety at bay. If I had to rely on any of these approaches, there's no way I could have ever worked paid only on results. That's why I'm on a mission, and that's why this is far more than just a job for me. The only reason I can walk today is because I didn't give up until I got world-class help. I was incredibly lucky. I found a small private hospital that did things totally differently to anyone else. They're on the cutting edge, they're fully grounded in the latest science, and they believed in me, not out of blind hope, but because they knew what they were doing. They knew I could walk again, just like I know you can be panic-free. And the most important key to you truly being panic-free? It's having the right comprehensive systematic approach that addresses each of the multiple dimensions to panic. We need a system that ends panic attacks, prevents future panic attacks, takes away all the anxiety you've had relating to panic, and gives you back a normal, unrestricted life so that you can go anywhere and do anything you want as comfortably and confidently as anyone else you know. Now, obviously, every element of our systematic approach needs to be fully grounded on the latest research has shown is the fastest, most dramatic, most reliable way to get lasting results. This is incredibly important because, again, panic is deeply counterintuitive. For example, did you know that almost every strategy tested for stopping a panic attack has been shown to reinforce panic and keep it in people's lives in the long term? There's even strong evidence that something that seems as harmless as deep breathing exercises can block people from getting better, even if it seems to be working in the short term. We can't afford to mess around with things that either don't work or make the situation even worse. And so again, this is why every element of our systematic approach needs to be fully grounded on what the latest research has shown is the fastest, most dramatic, most reliable way to get lasting results. Because the good news is that with the right systematic approach, you can be panic-free for good and faster than you probably ever imagined. Now, if any part of you still seems a little skeptical, that's completely okay. I'm used to people being a little skeptical before they've had the chance to discover firsthand that all of this is really true. So let me share with you a story that shows just how fast you can make panic a thing of the past, no matter your situation, even if it's been so bad that you've had problems even just leaving the house. A while ago, I worked with an occupational psychologist who was incredibly anxious whenever she tried to leave her house. In her own words, it was a bad situation, and since it was getting worse, she feared she might even lose her job. We worked together for just 45 minutes, and 8 months down the track, her problem is still gone. Here's what she said. I felt anxious every time I left my house, and it had a big impact on the way I was living my life. It was a bad situation. 8 months ago, I spent 45 minutes with Michael, and what he did was amazing. I can't explain it, but after working with him, I felt calm and relaxed, and my anxiety associated with leaving the house is no longer a problem. And here's what a recent Japanese client said about how he's finally got his normal life back after spending more than 4 years and $7,000 in therapy, which hadn't helped him at all. I taught him one technique that both ends and prevents panic attacks, and now he's able to travel anywhere he wants, even though he couldn't even take public transport or drive with others before. He's now making up for lost time, making his dreams come true, traveling all over Japan with a long list of countries he's going to visit around the world. I hope you're starting to sense that we really can get you your normal panic-free life back. And more than that, it can happen faster than you probably ever imagined. So how can we make this happen for you? Well, unfortunately, the number of clients that can help one-on-one is limited. But since I want to reach everyone who needs my help, I've created a scientifically grounded, step-by-step program that will take you from wherever you happen to be right now back to a life that's as normal, carefree, and panic-free as anyone else you know. It's called Panic Free, and because it's an online program, you can access it 24/7 from any part of the world on your smartphone, computer, or tablet, and start seeing results today. On top of this, as you'd expect given my background, Panic Free is totally paid on results. I'll explain more in a minute, but just so you understand how different this is from anything else you've tried, here's what Australian medical doctor Martin Russell has to say.
I'm a medical doctor who's had a full-time psychological practice for 15 years, and I've known Michael for almost all of this time. And no one else does or can do what Michael does. He possesses a deep understanding of the research, spanning several scientific fields, from the psychological to the biological and to the medical. And he's got a very rare skill set as a therapist. He's never been afraid to go against or stand up to the system. And on top of this, he's been able to package his approach in a way that's simple enough for anyone to use for themselves.
Panic Free is a comprehensive system that ends panic attacks, prevents future panic attacks, takes away all the anxiety you've had relating to panic, and gives you back a normal, unrestricted life so you can go anywhere and do anything you want as comfortably and confidently as anyone else you know. So let me quickly tell you about how Panic Free gives you each of these life-changing benefits so you'll fully appreciate just how much this is going to make a huge, immediate difference for you in your life. First of all, Panic Free gives you a totally counterintuitive technique that comes from world-class research done in Italy. It's the most effective technique ever scientifically tested that immediately stops a panic attack, no matter how intense or horrible it is. And most importantly, since it doesn't backfire like deep breathing exercises, distraction techniques, or other approaches, it works long-term to end the nightmare of panic for good. Also, because there's only one very simple step, you could never forget it even if you tried. This is essential because, as you may have noticed, it's incredibly hard to think clearly in the middle of a panic attack. And so you need something that always works fast, that you could never forget. And that's exactly what makes this Italian technique so incredibly unique. Unfortunately, because most of the research has only been published in Italian, Very few people in the English-speaking world know much about it, but you get it inside Panic Free. What this means is that you'll finally have control back. You'll no longer feel vulnerable, hoping and praying that panic doesn't strike out of the blue, and you'll never need to be at the mercy of a panic attack again. Now, Panic Free doesn't just give you the ability to immediately stop a panic attack as soon as it begins, because at best, that's just a good start. Panic Free means no more panic attacks ever again, and the great news is that this Italian technique doesn't just stop panic attacks, it also automatically helps prevent future panic attacks too in the process. This is just part of an entire system inside Panic Free that ends panic for good, fast. For example, you're also going to get my one-word technique that, believe it or not, I've used with clients to permanently free them from out-of-the-blue panic attacks in as little as 20 minutes from first meeting them. Since I'm not physically there with you one-on-one though, you will need to do one extra step before we start to prepare. Thankfully, it's an easy and simple step, and once you've done it, I'll guide you through the whole process as if I was sitting right next to you. This is an exciting technique that at first might even seem too simple to work, but it works, as you'll discover after you use it for yourself, because it quickly reconditions the internal triggers that research has shown make out-of-the-blue panic attacks possible. Along with the one-word technique, I'm also going to give you a unique procedure that was tested at the University of Wyoming and found to be significantly more effective than the previously considered gold standard approach for preventing both out-of-the-blue panic attacks and what are called situational panic attacks. If panic has stopped you from doing normal things like traveling, driving, shopping, flying, or anything else, we're gonna get you your freedom back so you can go anywhere and do anything you want as comfortably and confidently as anyone else you know. And the unique procedure tested at the University of Wyoming is the most scientifically validated method for doing this as fast and effectively as possible. Panic Free will also systematically free you from the anxiety that surrounds panic. This is really, really important because anxiety can take over and consume a person's life. And on top of this, being anxious about having another panic attack can actually trigger one. So I want to give you the best tools I've ever come across for ending anxiety fast. Remember the story I shared earlier when my wife took 10 minutes to translate one of my techniques to a Japanese yoga student of hers? It allowed that student to catch a train to another city, which is something she wasn't able to do before. I call this technique the 360 shift, and using it immediately triggers an automatic physiological shift that Professor Herbert Benson from Harvard University has called the relaxation response. The 360 shift only takes 1 or 2 seconds to use, and it automatically slows your heart rate, calms your breathing, and relaxes your mind. It doesn't require any willpower, doesn't require you to change your thinking, and the results are automatic and immediate. It's the easiest, most effective way I've ever come across to physiologically shift your mind and body into a state where you feel safer, calmer, and more secure. And since it's so easy to do, you can use the 360 shift in any situation, even if you're driving, or in the middle of an important job interview, or talking in front of a group of people. No one will notice a thing, except you're suddenly a lot more relaxed. And this is just one of the tools you get inside Panic Free that systematically takes away all the anxiety you've had relating to panic. I'm also going to give you the best tool I've ever come across for quickly stripping away the emotional impact of any panic-related memory. This can be very important because memories of past panic attacks can trigger future panic attacks, especially if people revisit the place where the panic attack happened. I've used this technique for almost 20 years with dramatic success, but it was only last year that it was finally tested in a $1 million scientific trial. After getting to know the lead researcher, I've been lucky enough to get early access to the results, which are scheduled for publication in an academic journal later this year. As I expected, the results show that this is the most effective method ever tested for wiping out the emotional impact of traumatic memories. It works fast, the results last, and you get it all inside Panic Free. And in fact, you get a lot more inside Panic Free than I have time to talk about. You get almost 3 hours of high definition video in 5 separate modules designed for easy playback on any digital device. You get easy to follow handouts, and you get the audio recordings to take with you wherever you go. Plus, there are also a few surprise bonuses. Everything is grounded in the latest science backed by peer-reviewed research published in the top anxiety-related journals, and is all made incredibly simple so that anyone can get immediate dramatic results. Panic Free is a step-by-step system that ends panic attacks, prevents future panic attacks, takes away all the anxiety you've had relating to panic, and gives you back a normal, unrestricted panic-free life. It works whether you've had just a few panic attacks so far, or whether you've been suffering from frequent panic attacks for decades. It's worked for people who've spent years in therapy with multiple therapists or doctors, and it's even worked for people who thought that they had tried everything under the sun, and that nothing would ever work for them. And because Panic Free is based on psychological principles that research has shown gets far better long-term results than medication, it even works if medication has failed you. And of course, it doesn't come with any nasty side effects. So how much is it? Well, working with me live in person one-on-one costs $2,000, of course paid on results, only if I help you truly become panic-free, and it's easily worth it. If panic is robbing you of your happiness or your basic right to feel safe in the world, if you've wasted hours and hours in painful therapy without results, or if you just know that panic attacks are making you miss out on so much that life has to offer, then $2,000 is cheap for getting your life back. Unfortunately though, not everyone can afford $2,000. Plus, I just don't have the time to personally help everyone I want to help one-on-one. Panic Free solves these problems. You've got me by your side anytime you want. You don't even have to leave the house, and it's all incredibly affordable. Because since I realize it's so hard to know who to trust online these days, the last thing I want to do is add more anxiety or uncertainty to your life by asking you to blindly trust me. Even though I hope you can already sense just from watching this video series that I really know what I'm talking about, and this really is the real deal, just to make sure you feel completely safe and secure about this, as I've done with all my one-on-one client work for years, I've made Panic Free entirely paid only on results. You can try the full system for 7 days for just $1. With $1, you can't even buy a coffee at Starbucks. But with Panic Free, you can get your life back. After 7 days, if and only if you agree that Panic Free really is the real deal, that it's the solution you've always been looking for, and that trying it was one of the best decisions you've ever made, then it's just 2 easy payments of $99 spread a month apart. Even then, you're still fully protected for a further 90 days by my no questions asked money back guarantee. Enjoy the sense of safety that comes from knowing you'll never have to suffer from the nightmare of panic attacks again. And enjoy the freedom that comes from being able to do anything and go anywhere you want with total peace of mind. In fact, enjoy all the benefits that Panic Free brings for a full 90 days, and then and only then decide if it's right for you. No questions, no hassles. Plus, no matter your decision, you can keep everything forever, because I want you to be delighted when you look back having finished this program, knowing that this is one of the best decisions you've ever made. All I ask is that you give me a fair go. I've put my heart, my soul, and a lifetime of experience into this program, and if you agree that this makes a huge difference for you, then it's easily worth the investment. I'm taking all the risk here, but I'm doing it for one reason. I know that if you honestly try Panic Free, you'll realize there's nothing else like it, and you'll wish that you'd had this program a long time ago. Because as you'll discover for yourself, Panic Free is a comprehensive system that ends panic attacks, prevents future panic attacks, takes away all the anxiety you've had relating to panic, and gives you back a normal, unrestricted life so you can go anywhere and do anything you want as comfortably and confidently as anyone else you know. And because it's an online program, it's just a few seconds away. If you're tired of never feeling truly safe, or if you hate the horrible feeling of constantly being anxious, and if you dream of finally enjoying a life that's as normal, carefree, and panic-free as anyone else you know, then to get started right now, all you need to do is click on the button below and you'll get full immediate access for just $1. Once you've entered your details on the secure order page, you'll automatically be taken to your members only area where you can access the whole program immediately. Start off by watching my introductory video because everything will take care of itself from that point on. This is about restoring a sense of safety. It's about giving you your panic-free life back. And it's about making sure that you'll be able to say that panic is truly just a thing of the past for you. I'm passionate about making this happen for you. And again, it's just one little dollar to get access to everything. I don't think I can make this any easier, safer, or more accessible than it already is. So let's get started together right now so I can help you finally become panic-free. I'll see you on the inside.